close enough. It's fine. Okay, everyone. So up next is Alexandra, who will be presenting her presentation From Misunderstood to CEO, Breaking Bias and Building Inclusion.
Thank you. And sorry for being late. Okay. All right, so first of all, thanks for being here. I know there is always a dozen reasons to skip a presentation, like, look for some coffee or whatever. So appreciate you showing up. My name is Alexandra Betuni. I work at Externally. So just a little bit of what we're doing. Basically, we are UI software specialists or UI software doctors, as we call it. So to say, we're based in Cyprus and having our engineering teams in Greece and Cyprus. And among our services are UI UX design, embedded UI development, applications development, prototype development, QML trainings, and whatnot. This is like more or less the tools we're using. Of course, always depends on customer project needs. But since we're mostly focusing on embedded, Qt, and Slint are among our, let's say, tools of preference, we're also Slint official service partner and Qt partner. So that's it about Externally. This is a slide. It's not broken. Now, today we are here basically for something different, not to talk about tech or yes, but not in a technical way. Before we start with my presentation, so I would like to ask you something, like forget about the abstract if you have read it or not, like based on what I look, maybe I can also step here. What do you think I do? Like raise hands, designer? Yes, okay. Marketing? Okay, I like that. Junior developer? Maybe because I don't look that junior, right? Or CEO? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nice. Okay, so marketing is the winner here. So we're here to talk about From Misunderstood to CEO, Breaking Bias and Building Inclusion. Again, my name is Alexandra Betuni. I'm the CEO of Externally. I'm a Qt champion for 2024, a Qt developer and author. So I'm authoring 2 Qt online Udemy courses and 1 in Qt Academy as well. And yeah, let's start. First of all, why I wanted to share that. Basically, I had a bit of an unusual path through tech, so to say. I'm often introduced by my title, so CEO, which sounds very serious, by the way. But the reality is, for a good portion of my career, people mostly assumed I was the designer, not the marketing. Or marketing, which basically I listened to that recently as well. So it became a bit, of a running theme. Well, do you wrote that? It was like, I thought you were just here to observe, like in meetings, like people were just telling me, like, you're surprisingly technical, like, and, I still don't know what that one means, but anyways. Over time, then I started to notice basically that I was not the only one. So friends, colleagues, people with different backgrounds, accents, or styles, they were all, being underestimated in small, quiet ways. And, those small things, they always add up. So I thought, instead of quietly venting in group chats, maybe it's worth sharing a bit about it more openly, okay? About what it feels, like what helped me push through it, and what we can all do to make our teams a bit more inclusive, even like in these little moments. So even if one person here today walks away thinking, oh, maybe I've seen that, maybe I can do something differently, or, it's not just me, then I'll count that as a win. So that's really what these slides basically, in a nutshell, is I came into tech with a non-traditional background, coming from Greece, in Germany, being in a major automotive project, so, I was not really the profile that, someone would expect. So my career has been shaped more, by misperceptions than by actual qualifications, basically. And basically, I never expected to lead. I just didn't stop showing up. So we'll talk about that a bit later. I'm still here, still building, and now leading. So, and that's why I'm here today, basically. So, okay, let's get into it. This one basically has some animations, but anyway, I will tell everything. So when I first entered the tech world, I was just, excited to build cool stuff. Like, I didn't think too much about how I'd be perceived from others, of course. I assumed if I worked hard, it would just show. So I quickly learned that being competent doesn't always protect you from being misread or misunderstood. In my first full-time dev role, mentioned here in Germany, I remember I was at the Q World Summit here in Berlin like a few years ago, and this is what this comic is about. So one colleague wanted to introduce me to another colleague of his, like ex-colleague of his, and he said like, yeah, she's working on the project with us. And then the other guy said, oh, nice to meet you. Then he like immediately said, you work on a design team, right? I was like, man, I wrote the UI code. I mean, why? And okay, that was a bit awkward, but what stung wasn't just the assumptions, basically. It was how often it happened, right? So then I quickly started to question myself, like, am I dressed wrong? Am I not sounding technical enough? Might be. Should I try to act more like one of the guys? Whatever that means, right? So then I became fluent in the art of, proving myself, right? That's why maybe basically I like beer now. I don't know. So I was starting, every conversation with a mini resume, like, I studied computer science and I had my internship in big data and so on. I started, dropping acronyms to establish, technical credibility, so like talking about pointers and objects and whatnot. Just staying late, just to make it, harder for anyone to doubt, I was just pulling my weight. I remember I was leaving the office at 6:30 p.m., 7 p.m., and that was basically it was not just exhausting, it was also distracting. So basically, I just wanted to focus on, writing great code, collaborating with teammates, and learning. So instead, I was spending half of my time and energy, managing other people's expectations, basically. So, however, even though now this is still happening, I just have to say that. That's why the early days is actually, let's say, deleted. I remember earlier this year, we had a booth at a major conference here in Germany, and I just decided to, wander around a bit, see what other exhibitors do, and then I stopped by one, and the guy started, asking me, what do you guys do? And I was like, we do UI software and so on, and he said, oh, wow, that's cool. So I will come by to see what you guys doing, do your demos and stuff. And then suddenly he was like, do you only have the marketing team here? So of course I said, no, I'm the CEO and, one of our main developers is here as well. The guy didn't never show up. So yeah, early days, not really the case. So here's the thing. Basically, I know I'm not the only one, right? So many of us who come from non-default backgrounds in tech, whatever that means, like your gender, your origin, your accent, your age, your education, whatever that means, we learn early on that being good is not always enough. So you also have to explain why you belong. That's the problem. And the good news basically is that those experiences didn't actually break me. It just gave me material for this talk. So now I want to talk about something that most of us in this room have probably felt at some point, whether we realized it or not. I call it the invisible weight. So it's the stuff you carry that's not in your job description, right? Like having to prove you actually know what you're doing every day and on repeat. Or when you say something in a meeting and no one hears it, or maybe they just ignore you, and then 5 minutes later somebody else says the same thing, and oh, that's a good idea. So I see some of you are smiling, so yes. Already. So I guess you know what you mean. You know what I mean. So this slide behind me is basically my favorite way of explaining it. So you've got your skills, experience, and maybe, even a degree or two that stands above the surface. But below the surface is where all the energy is going. So we have assumptions, like you must be the intern, or like you must be the designer, or whatever. We have stereotypes, like you're probably better at front end, right? Yeah, whatever. We have emotional labor, so like decoding what someone really meant in that email and also deciding at the same time if it's safe to speak up, worrying if you're too direct or not confident enough. And we have the imposter syndrome. So even when no one is doubting about you, you are, right? So the tricky part is that no one sees that stuff. When you're tired or frustrated, it's easy to feel that it's just you, like nobody else feels like that. And then that you're not resilient enough or don't have the right mindset. But the truth is, like, the system wasn't designed with everyone in mind. And, some of us are climbing with extra weights to our backs, and we're still expected to reach the same milestones at the same time as others. So if you ever felt like that, like you had to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously, you're not imagining it. It's there. And if you haven't felt it, then maybe someone from your team has already. And that's why I think this matters. So we've talked about bias in broad terms. I wanted to also share a few specific stories, some mine and some from colleagues that I've worked with. And I guess you might recognize a few of these patterns. So first of all, we have Juan. Of course, it's not Juan, it's anonymous thing, but the guy is a US national with Latin American roots, was working on major automotive projects as well. He's brilliant, like been writing embedded C++ and 3D stuff like for so long. And then one day we were both heading to a meeting room and someone, stops him at the door and said, "Could you bring us up coffee like before the session starts?" And the guy was just a junior developer, right? So it's funny, but of course it sticks. And then we have a second story, Priya from India, another brilliant C++ and Qt developer. She was a senior technical lead at Mercedes-Benz, no less. But long before that, when she decided to actually be a programmer, then she told her family and friends about it, and the answer was like, "But you're a woman," Anyways, fast forward a few years, she was mentoring, junior engineers, leading architecture discussions, and so on. Her story is not unusual, basically, but it took effort, talent, and a lot of quiet resilience to get there. And then another one of my stories as well. I noticed when I was in meetings during my career, basically what I just mentioned also before, that I would say something and, nobody would pay attention. Then after a few minutes and somebody else would say the same thing. And, the rest of the guys were like, "Oh, that's a brilliant idea. So let's do that." I thought, I was just imagining it, but then I've read the meeting notes at some point, and I saw it was there, so I just understood that it was just ignored. Anyway, these stories aren't here to make anyone feel guilty, basically. They're here to, show patterns so we can start noticing them. So if you ever experienced something like this, you're not imagining it. If you haven't, maybe you've accidentally been that person once or twice. But anyways, the good news is that we can do better, and actually it starts with awareness. Okay. Yeah. So when we zoom out from individual stories, what do we actually see? We start to notice patterns, as I just mentioned. Not just, bad luck or isolated incidents, but structural repeating behaviors that show up again and again. So For example, some I've experienced so far is like gatekeeping. For example, you need 10 years of cute. You only have 8? No, come back later, for example. Or like who gets involved into technical discussions, for example, or who's trusted to push to main, or who's trusted to, merge the paths on Gerrit, for example, or approve, whatever. So gatekeeping doesn't always look, like saying no, but sometimes it's just not saying anything at all. Second is assumptions about competence. So we made assumptions so fast in tech, like, how someone looks like, what country their name sounds like, how fluent their English is. And we tie those assumptions to how senior we think someone is, right? I've seen brilliant engineers, as I've already talked, like treated like interns, and average ones treated like rock stars just because they have, the presence. Then we have communication bias. That's a fun one. Like when a woman says something directly, it's too aggressive, right? But when a man says the same, it's assertive leadership. Okay. When someone speaks up often in meetings, it's disruptive. Unless if they're a founder, then it's called vision. So these biases, show up in performance reviews and, who gets hurt. So it's like there all the time. Then we have the culture fit trap. I guess you've all heard, we're looking for someone who fits our vibe, or not sure if they fit into the team, right? So basically that's often a shorthand for they're different. So culture fit is how many inclusive hires get just filtered out before they, get even in the door. So the idea here is to aim for culture add instead, not just filtering out because, Then we have invisible labor. So, who tends to do the mentoring, the onboarding, the emotional support, like all of this work. We have to also credit that work as well, because somebody, it's not only about code, basically. And that work doesn't always show up on promotion reviews, but, it's just getting through down the table. Anyways, actually, none of that is to, blame people. These patterns aren't basically personal, are just structural. We're just like, let's say, programmed that way because the society is programmed that way. But once you see them, then you start noticing them everywhere. So the thing is here that you can start, interrupting them. Just speaking about me, up until this point, back when I was working, I thought if I just worked harder, stayed later, spoke less, learned faster, the noise would just go away. But the thing is that you cannot outwork bias. You cannot fix being misunderstood. This will be always there. What you can fix actually is like reframe how you see yourself, right? Not as someone lucky to be there, but as someone who belonged, like not in spite of your background, but because of it. So my big shift, so to say, came from a mentor who saw me before, I fully saw myself. And they told me, you're already doing the work of a lead, so it's time to step into it, right? And basically that sentence, it stuck with me. It didn't erase all the doubt, but it made me, walk differently, a bit more confident. So around the same time, I just stopped trying to lead, like the loudest person in the room, but, I started leading in a way that came naturally to me, like, listening before acting, connecting across silos, asking questions like that others avoid to ask. And it's not because I read these things in a book, but because that's what I needed, in order to stay in tech, and it turns out it just worked. So growth isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just, show up as yourself, like doesn't matter. To pretend you're something else. Now, here's the part I'd love to, zoom out a bit, because this isn't just my story, as I said, it's also an opportunity. So I'm a big believer that inclusion isn't a job title, basically, it's a habit, something we build in a way we code, we collaborate, and we communicate. So here are a few things that I've seen work, like you should always challenge assumptions, ask yourself, do I expect this person to be technical or not? I mean, am I surprised when someone speaks up? Did I assume they were junior based on age, accent, or gender? I mean, why should I do that, right? Just noticing the assumption is a huge first step. So let's start from there. Then amplify quieter voices. Then if someone makes a point, that gets overlooked, to say, as Maria mentioned earlier, so give credit back to the person it came from. And this basically matters more than you think, especially in fast-moving team settings. Give fact-based feedback, skip vague comments, you come off strong, you're too soft, and so on. Focus on impact, not tone or personality. Ask yourself, would I say this to someone else if they looked or sounded differently, for example? And then speak with people, not for them. Don't assume what someone else wants or needs. Just ask them, basically. Invite them into a conversation, what would support look like for you right now, for example. So all these kind of things. Basically, I believe that leadership is not, a one-size-fits-all thing. Let's stop acting like that. At the end of the day, the goal isn't to be perfect. It's just to be open, curious, and, committed to living tech better than what we found it. So, since we're here at Academy, let's talk a bit about FOSS specifically. So open source is one of the most powerful spaces for learning, growing, and contributing, especially for folks outside traditional pipelines. I guess we all agree into that. But open doesn't always mean welcoming. So we sometimes think that because a repo is public, anyone can jump in, right? That's not the case. And it's not always how it feels. If you ever opened the PR and got silence for a week, then, or asked a basic question and got snarky reply, or felt lost in a sea of inside jokes and acronyms and so on, that open isn't always the same as inclusive. So what helps? Here's a list of a few things we could consider doing, write better readmes, not just how to run the code, but how to participate, how to get feedback, what to expect, and so on, as a README is often the front door of your community, right? Use inclusive language when, in code and docs, avoid cultural references that assume that everybody shares your background, because it's not the case. Use language that assumes curiosity, not experience. Here's what this file does is better than this is obvious. So say hi when someone joins the chat. It's very basic, very simple, but powerful. Just one kind welcome message could turn someone into a contributor at some point. Credit contributions fairly and publicly, even small PRs, even documentation fixes or typos. Why not? This is all work that matters, and recognition builds momentum. Don't assume silence is disinterest. So not everybody has the same character, so to say. We're not all open, or a quick check-in can show people you care, and help them re-engage if needed. Avoid inside jokes. Basically, this means that if your humor requires history, then maybe rethink it, or explain it to the person first before you start joking about it. Be a welcomer, not just a maintainer. So this is not just about merging code, it's about also mentoring people all the time. And then create friendly onboarding. Use checklist or whatever you think it can make people feel like there's a place for them and a way to grow, right? This one, I like it. Mentorship isn't charity, right? It's strategy, meaning that, helping people grow basically makes your community more resilient in a way that you don't just wait for maintainers to burn out, but you grow new ones so that, your community can also benefit from that. Recognize invisible labor, who's holding emotional tone in the chat, who's reviewing the code and so on. Let's credit that work too. Also, inclusion is not just code commits, after all. And finally, words matter. So comment your code, like a future contributor is watching. I know I'm asking for very difficult things, but answer questions as if that person, might be your next core dev. Speak like someone is learning from you, basically, because they are. So you don't need to be a maintainer to make FOSS more welcoming in general. So just being intentional, kind, and a little more human, that's already a huge step, basically. So I won't keep you for longer. Just a few final reflections. I've shared a few stories today, some mine, some from others. Not to point fingers or just dwell what's wrong, but to say, that this stuff, it's real, it's there, but it's changeable. We don't all have the same power, but we do all have moments where we get to choose, do I help someone feel seen? Do I make space? Do I speak up or stay silent, for example? And that's where the culture of tech gets shaped, not just in keynotes, but in comments, in code reviews and conversations. The thing is that I've never, let's say, set out to be the inclusive one. I was just trying to survive long enough to do work, I cared about in my career. But here's the twist. The more I showed up as myself, the more I found others who were doing the same. And, that changes everything. So whether you're a student, a contributor, a manager, founder, maintainer, whatnot, let's build the kind of tech community we want to belong to. One where you don't have to prove yourself just in order to be respected. And even if one person leaves this room today feeling a little more seen, or thinking a little bit more bravely about how they show up, then I think we're already building it. That's it. Thank you.
Yep. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, I want to thank you for your courage. I think it's not easy, but you did it, and your analysis is quite sharp. So I think that's good, and you're strong by doing this as well. I have just a question, and I want to confirm, people work in patterns. I mean, it's hard to change. It's not even conscious. It's just as it is. But my question is, you might also have met people that trusted in you, probably just a few. Can you just, give an example or recall how this was, if you have met them?
Yeah, first of all, thanks. And yes, I did, for sure. I guess there were a few. I can count them in my fingers, like that few. It was just, they were themselves. That's what basically I wanted to, express with that. Just being yourself is when you do that, it doesn't cost you anything to just, give credit to someone. Just recognize their efforts or their talent. That's it. Like, don't try not to follow the patterns. Just, if you see something, then just say. I mean, even if it's good or bad, right? But because there's also, that somebody does something wrong, you can also say that. The thing is that then the other person should be in a way that, okay, accept and, accept it as feedback and so on. So, yeah, it's a bit of a complex matter, but as I said, just start with awareness and then, try to, analyze yourself when you do stuff and then ask yourself, like, why did I do that? And then you can be this person that you are basically telling to the other person that, you're good in that and so on, instead of following patterns. And when you do that, then the other person, of course, earns like confidence and, has, bit more power to move on, right? So I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Anybody else? Oh.
Thank you. Thank you for your talk. Yeah, I just want to say I've seen these patterns that you talk about with women colleagues, but also myself as a migrant, where I would get comments like, "Oh, I didn't expect you would be this good coming from this place," and things like that. And I was thinking that online, when I was just a username, I wasn't being judged as much. I was only being judged on what I was saying. Maybe my English wasn't native level, kind of. So I wonder if you have a different experience when people only see your username, and something to take away from that, like being pseudonymous rather than showing up as your all the facets. Yeah.
It's a very, very short answer. My username is female. So I do. Yeah. I can use Alex instead, which often gets, that's a guy, Alex. So,
Anybody else? Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. So we have a little bit of a break till the next one. So the next talk starts at 6 exactly. So feel free to go to the bathroom, take a break, whatever you need. We'll be back.